Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am yet again in a different space, and honestly this might end up just being my summer filming space on the floor of my room because other people are in other rooms of the house where I normally would film. So bear with me. It's annoying when I'm editing because I have doors on either side and the doorknobs and the lighting, and you know, this is just how it is right now. It also feels like it's been so long since I have sat down to film, which honestly it has, because we went on a vacation in June and it was super nice, but I did a lot of filming prior to that in order to be able to schedule out my videos. And honestly, that's the most scheduled out I have been, I think, in the history of my YouTube channel. And it was a very nice feeling. I would love to be a little bit more ahead of the game more often because that was really nice. So we shall certainly see how that ends up going. But for today, I am going to be doing my June reading wrap up. In June, I read 9 books for a total of 3,106 pages, although if we break down pages versus audiobooks, it was 1,585 pages and 39.57 audio hours. The longest book I read was 552 pages, and that was The Book Thief. And the shortest book I read was The Answer Is No by Frederick Bachman, and that was 82 pages. I did a much better job this month of actually tracking the start date of when I began a book, not just the end date. So according to Storygraph, it took me on average about 10 days to finish a book. 3 of the books I read were hard copy, 4 were audiobooks, and 2 were ebooks. 5 of them were from the library or Libby. 2 of them I purchased, and 2 were on Kindle Unlimited. 1 book was nonfiction and 8 were fiction. I think that's been the breakdown the last 3 months, if I remember correctly. And in June, from utilizing my library, I saved a grand total of $89.65. As for publication date, this is quickly becoming one of my favorite stats. I don't know why, I just find it so fascinating to see the breakdown of the publication years of the books that I've been reading. So in June, 1 book that I read was published in 2025, 2 were published in 2024, 1 in 2023, 3 in 2022, 1 in 2009, and 1 in 2005. I will also throw up a graph. It's the same map from last time. I still have not sat down to figure out a better map graphic, but here is a basic map graphic from where the authors are from of the books that I read in June. I think this is also becoming one of my favorite things to track. It's really nice to see the visual of where the authors are from. The first book that I want to highlight is absolutely The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This book I've talked about in a couple videos because it took me a little while to go through it. And I was reading this as a buddy read with Mimi from It's Mimi Duong, and I am so glad that we decided to read this at the same time. It's a long book, and it's written in such a way that you just want to take your time with it. It is absolutely beautifully written. So if you are unfamiliar with this story, it is a historical fiction book that takes place during World War II in Berlin, Germany. Our main character is named Liesel, and at the very beginning of the book, we see that she is traveling with her mom and brother. We don't really know where, but as the first few chapters unravel, we find out that the mom is trying to send her children to where she believes they'll be safe during the war. And Liesel ends up going to live with this German family in Berlin. The interesting thing about this book is that the narrator is actually Death. It's told from the point of view of Death. I am still trying to put words to how I felt reading this book and all of the things that it made me think about. I think I referenced this in another video. The writing actually reminded me of Frederick Bachman's writing style in just the descriptions, the turns of phrases, and the beautiful way that the words are used to convey the story. I absolutely loved the storytelling itself. It also reminded me of Frederick Bachman because both of these authors, well, okay, this is the first book I've read by Marcus Zusak, but I am definitely interested in reading more by him because I'm curious if this is his trademark writing style. But at least from The Book Thief and Frederick Bachman's books, they both have a way of making you think. And in The Book Thief, we are confronted with so many real human emotions as various characters in the story, and I want to be careful what I say because I don't want to give spoilers, but there are characters who are grappling with the fact that if they make choices to stand against the occupying soldiers in Berlin, then they could be putting themselves and their family and their children at risk. But if they don't, what are the moral ramifications of doing the right thing and choosing not to do the right thing? It just humanized it in such an amazing way. And of course, which I guess I never even really completely said what this book was about, the way that the story itself takes place, because we have Liesel, who is fascinated by books, and she gets the moniker the book thief because throughout the course of the story, she steals 4 books, and the way that books and words affect her. There's a beautiful description of how, towards the end of the book, for how the books themselves have brought her so much hope and so much horror. And it's just, obviously I still don't fully have words for this. This book is very powerful. The story of this young girl who is growing up with all of these horrible, awful things happening, and she just wants to be a kid, and yet she has to grapple with so many things. The way that this girl is able to bring hope to herself, to her friends, to her community, the way that she chooses to do the right thing when her family is confronted with whether or not they are going to help somebody in need or not. It's a very profound book. It's a book that absolutely will stick with me for a while. It is a very emotional book. This book made me tear up multiple times. So I had been putting it off. I know I've said this before. I've been putting it off for a while, but I really am glad that I made the time to read it. And it was on my 40 before 40 list, so it was really nice to mark another book off that list. It's one that my best friend picked for me to read. So yes, I am glad that she suggested it, and I'm glad that Mimi was down to do a buddy read for it. And yes, I highly recommend this book. The next book to highlight is This Time You Save Yourself by Zara Baz. I do not have a great track record for pronouncing names on my channel, and usually I will look up on YouTube how to pronounce people's names, like author interviews, and to make sure that I'm pronouncing it the correct way. I've not been able to find interviews or videos with this author, so hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I may not be. This is the second poetry book by this author that I have read. Last year, I believe, I read I Have to Tell You Something, and it was really good. I loved it, and I definitely wanted to read more, which is why I purchased this one, and it was absolutely amazing as well. It's 178 pages of poetry, and the author is talking a lot about healing after trauma, after betrayal, after people that were supposed to love you did not love you, and poems talking about how to reclaim and rebuild yourself. I really enjoyed this poetry, and I definitely want to read more. I think there are 2 other poetry books, so I want to read those as well because very amazing and powerful poetry. I also read the second book in the Hunger Games series, Catching Fire. I want to be careful what I say because there were several things that happened towards the beginning of the book that I did not even realize that that's what this was about, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody else who might be reading the series for the first time. But non-spoilery parts. This book is about the Quarter Quell, which is a special type of Hunger Games situation that takes place every 25 years. It's the 3rd Quarter Quell since the games started. And that's about all that I want to say. I listened to it on audio, and I was not a huge fan of the narrator, but I did not find out until I was most of the way through that apparently there are other narrators. I don't know why I thought there was just like one official narrator, but by that point I was already, I think, 3/4 the way through, so I decided to go ahead and finish. So honestly, I did not connect to the story nearly as much as I did with the first one, but I think it was a combination of I listened to it while I was traveling, I didn't care for the narrator, and it was audio versus the physical copy, so take that for what it is. It was still interesting. I did still enjoy it. I definitely have questions. I am in line for the 3rd book, the physical copy, at the library, and hopefully I will get it soon. It says I'm next in line. So I'm very curious to see how my questions get answered. And I don't think I can say too much in this video because I don't want it to be spoilery. I was not a fan of some things, but I also yeah, don't know if it's going to be wrapped up in the third book. So time will tell. On our flight to France, unfortunately, my TV screen was not working on the flight. I was planning to watch the movie for the first Hunger Games on the flight, but I was not able to. But while we were in France, I listened to the audiobook of Catching Fire. So on the flight home, I was able to watch the first two movies, and I really enjoyed them. The books, I do think, are 9.9 times out of 10, always better than movies. However, I was surprised by how well the movies did portray what happened in the books. I thought it was a fairly accurate movie rendition, so that was kind of cool. The next book to highlight is Tell Me What You Did by Carter Wilson. At the beginning of this year, I really wanted to read some more thrillers this year, and I have definitely found some good ones. This book I did listen to on audio. It's another book that kind of takes the format of a podcast, or at least sections of it are, because our main character, Poe, is a podcast host, and she will interview people for her podcast, and she always says the famous words, "Tell me what you did," and then she'll just listen for 15 minutes while the other person says whatever they want about their story, confessing whatever they would like. And then at the end of the 15 minutes, if it's interesting and Poe finds it to be relatively credible, then she will interview and dialogue and ask questions. But at one point, she is interviewing a man who starts to seem rather familiar, and he is making comments about her past and knowing what she did and things like that. And we find out that he is claiming to be the murderer of her mother from years ago. Interestingly enough, and this is not a spoiler because it's on the book blurb, Poe is very confused because the details he's talking about no one else should know. However, she doesn't think he can actually be the murderer because she killed her mother's murderer years before. So now she's being threatened, her loved ones are being threatened, and she has to figure out, who is this guy? Is he actually the murderer? And if so, who did she kill? And what the heck is happening? So it was very interesting. And the person who voices this man did a very good job, because there were some parts that I was listening to that were slightly creepy, but it was I really liked the audio presentation of it. But overall, I really liked the audio presentation for it. In my opinion, it was not an incredible thriller. Like, there were still some parts where I was like, oh, like it wasn't fully believable, but I did really enjoy it. And especially when I was, doing other things around the house or whatnot, it was a very gripping audio narration. And I'm just so happy to be back in thrillers because it's just such a fun genre. I love the way it messes with my brain. Okay, and the last book to highlight is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I remember this book being talked about so much. I felt like it was really popular for a while. And I was really surprised when I went to the publication date that was published in 2022, which was only 3 years, wait, what is this? Yes, only 3 years ago, but I felt like it was like a new release, like a year or so. Anyways, it surprised me that it's already been 3 years since it was published. This book is a memoir about the author's life and her growing up years. It's another one that I did on audio, and the author narrates it herself, which I always love in a biography or memoir. When Jeanette was 6 years old, her mother was really pushing for her to become a child actor and do these auditions and take these jobs and all of these things. Jeanette is very open and vulnerable about the way that a lot of these things affected her, being pushed into this career that she didn't necessarily want to do. And she shares a lot about her growing up years with her mom and the way that her mom taught her, I believe when she was 11, about what she called calorie restriction, but was basically not eating, very disordered eating, the abuse that she went through from her mom. I thought that this memoir was remarkably well done, obviously because she's telling her own personal story, and I always feel a little bit awkward talking about memoirs because it's someone's personal story. The way though that Jeanette wrote about her life was so visceral because she talks about, she just kind of laid out the facts, and as the reader we can see this is not right, but also the way that, especially when she was young and a child, and that she was conditioned to think that this is the way things are, and this is in order to be a good daughter, and I love my mom, I want to take care of my mom, and the pressure that she felt to take care of her mom, to make her happy, to do the right thing, to earn money, all of these things. Like, it's heartbreaking. And the way that Jeanette was able to communicate that, the way that we understand why Jeanette believed it, because I think it's so easy. It can be so easy for people who have not grown up with a narcissistic parent or abusive parents to be able to have like this zoomed out view and say, oh, well, I don't know. People will say things like, why didn't you just leave? Or how come you didn't notice? And I'm still trying to put it into words. The way that she was able to describe the conditioning and the brainwashing. And it felt very real and believable. I mean, obviously it was her story, but even though I did not grow up with the exact same things, just the way that conditioning and years of conditioning affects a person's reality and perception of things, she just described it all so well. And I really appreciate her being able to share, and seeing, especially towards the end, as she shared about her realizations and therapy and growing up and out of her upbringing and finding herself and finding healing. It's very moving and very thought-provoking, and a very good memoir. So there is my June wrap up and some of my highlights from last month. In just a minute, I'm going to film my July TBR. Will it be as chaotic as the last couple months? Who knows? I don't think so, but I guess time will tell. And until next time, happy reading.